Radosław Sikorski, the member of the European Parliament and former Minister of National Defense of Poland, is the guest of Spotlight Ukraine. Hello and welcome.
Hello.
Hello, pleased to meet you. So now we're going to talk a bit about the sanctions and how successful are Western sanctions against Russia. What do you think?
Well, thank you for inviting me on the show. And secondly, congratulations on your documentary, which I think was fair. I think what is having the biggest influence on Russia's ability to continue the war is, in fact, the denial of imports to Russia of dual-use technologies. The fact that Russia is finding it difficult to find the integrated circuits, the chips to make weapons, is having an impact on its ability to wage war, to make new missiles, for example. I would only add that Europe has done more to help Ukraine and punish Russia than I would have expected, say, a month before the full-scale invasion. I did not expect Europe, for example, to freeze the assets of the Central Bank of Russia. This is an unprecedented move. I'm not myself an expert on the technical means of imposing sanctions, but I do know this, that it's not a one-off event, that sanctions busters, sanctions evaders, find new ways of evading sanctions, and you need to keep moving. And that's why we have this 11th package of sanctions in order to block the loopholes. This is good. This means that Europe is serious about helping Ukraine and preventing Russia from building a new army.
Okay, so for a year since the full-scale invasion to Ukraine, there were like 10 packages of sanctions imposed against Russian economy. But how fragile has the Russian economy become for this year?
Well, from what Secretary Blinken is saying, and this must be an American intelligence estimate, Putin for the first time is having to choose between spending on consumption at home and spending on his military. So he is having a difficult choice between shoring up political support among Russian people or prosecuting his war. Good. This is an uncomfortable choice for him.
Before we continue, let's see a bit about the Russia's financial losses due to the sanctions.
During the year of full-scale war in Ukraine, Russia's budget hole due to the sanctions reached 7 trillion rubles, or more than $85.5 billion. This is 4.5 times more than the Kremlin had predicted. But this year, the terrorist state is likely to suffer even greater losses. In the first quarter of 2023, Russian treasury revenues fell by 21%. The budget deficit has already reached almost 2.5 trillion rubles, or about $24.5 billion. Oil and gas tax collections have fallen the most, by 45%, while other revenues have decreased by 3.5%. At the same time, the projected annual expenditures of the Russian budget increased by 34%, and almost a third of it is accounted for by the so-called secret items.
So for how long Putin and his regime is ready to pay for this war?
If you're asking me, it's a race between the Ukrainian ability to continue its state functions and to continue to finance the war, and Russia's ability to do the same. We estimate that Ukraine has received a combined contribution from the United States and from the European Union and its member states, roughly $70 billion each. So it's about $140 billion altogether last year. That's real money. Ukrainian state is ticking over, pensions are being paid, civil servants are being paid, electricity is being paid for, because IMF and the European Union are sustaining the Ukrainian state budget. The Americans are stronger on weapons deliveries. The question is who will crack first, not only on the battlefield, but also in the financial sphere. And the Russians are having to draw on their reserves, which are much smaller than they anticipated. They thought they had all these central bank reserves at the European Central Bank and at the Federal Reserve. In fact, what they have left is what they have in the Central Bank of China, in yuan, plus their gold reserves. Their current income is limited by the loss of the most lucrative market for Russian energy, which is Europe, and by China's rather opportunistic policy of buying Russian energy only at a huge discount.
Yep.
So I think the Russians will very soon be having to sell their gold reserves, probably to China, which is an aspect of Russia becoming a vassal state to China.
Thank you. That's a really good point. Thank you so much for being the guest of Spotlight Ukraine. Radosław Sikorski, the member of the European Parliament and former Minister of the National Defense of Poland, was the guest of Spotlight Ukraine. And we were discussing the Western sanctions. Do they really successful against Russia? Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Latest news, trends, and analytics on all about Ukraine. Like, share, and subscribe. Any questions, proposals, and comments, contact us via email.